The Book of Enoch, the man who walked with God. There is a name so ancient that many have forgotten its existence, a name hidden within ancient scriptures, a name known to the early church fathers, a name described in the book of Genesis in 7 words that hold more mystery than all theological libraries combined. His name was Enoch, and those 7 words are: he walked with God and was no more. He did not die. He was not buried. He did not return to the land from which he came. He was no more.
This is either the strangest sentence in the scriptures or the most important. For in a world mired in its own corruption, in a generation that has forgotten the voice of God, one man refused to forget. One man chose a different rhythm. A man, slowly, consciously, faithfully, walked in the direction everyone else was leaving. And God took him to him. This is not a history lesson. This is a mirror. And if you look long enough, you will see your own reflection in that mirror. Part 1. The world of the past. Before we understand Enoch, we need to understand the world in which he was born. Heroism only makes sense when you understand the darkness around it. A candle in a brightly lit room means nothing. But a candle in a cave, that changes everything. Enoch was born in a cave. Not literally a cave, but spiritually, morally, cosmically, the world of his time was a place of deep and accelerating darkness. The generations from Adam to the flood were not merely flawed, they were catastrophically broken. And at the heart of this brokenness was something the modern world struggles to take seriously: the fall of certain beings who should never have fallen, the Watchers. In texts dating back centuries before the New Testament, there was a class of angels whose purpose was to watch over and protect humanity. They were not created to intervene. They were not permitted to desire. They were only tasked with watching. But watching became a desire for them, and that desire became rebellion. 200 of these watchers descended upon a mountain called Hermon. They named their leaders Semyaza, Azazel, and Armaros, and they decided to do what they knew was forbidden. They took wives from among the daughters of men. They fathered children in a world not designed to bear them. And these children were not ordinary children. They were giants. The texts call them Nephilim, beings of immense size and strength, beings whose appetites exceeded what the earth could feed. They consumed the food of men, and when the food ran out, they consumed men themselves. They consumed everything they could reach, and when everything was consumed, they attacked one another. And with the Nephilim came something perhaps even more dangerous: the knowledge brought by the Watchers. Azazel taught men to make weapons of iron, and to women he taught the art of seduction, the art of drawing desire like a net. Others turned astrology into witchcraft, transforming sacred knowledge into power for personal gain. Fire had been given to humanity, and someone had taught them to burn the world with it. Into this world, a world of giants and witchcraft, of corrupted knowledge and bleeding altars, a child was born. His name was Enoch, son of Jared. He was not the most intelligent, the strongest, or the most beautiful child. What the texts celebrated was something rarer and quieter. He listened. In a world that had forgotten how to be quiet, Enoch was quiet. He heard the frequency beneath all the sounds, his voice speaking without syllables. He walked through the fields at dawn and dusk, and did not merely observe the sky, he accepted it. And God responded to that openness. God responds not to performance, but to attitude. He responds not to the loudest prayer, but to the most sincere prayer. Enoch was remarkable not for what he did, but for how he waited. In a world completely lost in its attention, he was remarkable for the quality of his attention. He was 65 years old when his son Methuselah was born, and something changed. He looked into his son's face and for the first time understood the nature of what was at stake, not as an abstract theology, as a burning, concrete, personal reality. This child would inherit the world that was being destroyed. And from that day forward, Enoch walked with God in a way entirely different from anything that had come before. Part 2. The call. In every true spiritual life, there is a moment when the nature of your walk changes, when it ceases to be a lifestyle and becomes a profession. When you realize that God is in your life, not just as a companion, but as a caller. When you realize that all the time you thought you were walking with Him, He was actually leading you towards something. This moment came for Enoch in the valley. As he walked across the open land, the air changed. The quality of the light changed. The sounds of the world receded, as if the world itself were holding its breath. And then, from a place neither above nor below, nor to the left nor to the right, but somehow at the center of everything came a voice. It was a sound he recognized not because he had heard it before, but because it had been created by him.
Enoch, son of mankind, prepare yourself. You are deemed worthy to ascend beyond the world. You will see what is hidden and carry visions that will shatter your soul and rebuild it stronger than stone.
Enoch fell to the ground, not from weakness, but from the only appropriate response to the encounter with a reality too great for the standing body. He buried his face in the earth, not just fear, not just wonder, but the feeling of a man who has discovered that his entire life has been preparation for a single moment, and that moment has arrived.
Yes,
he said. He said yes as a river says yes to the sea, for rivers were created for this, and all flow was always toward this single destination. That night, as he closed his eyes, his soul lightened. Between the visible and the invisible, there is a threshold that most people never approach in their entire lives. Not because it is unreachable, but because they do not linger long enough to find it. A person who is constantly in motion is a person who will never discover what lies beneath the motion. Enoch had been practicing stillness for 65 years, and now silence had become a door. He passed through it, and nothing that is real remains buried forever.
Part 3. The Fall of the Watchers. The first vision Enoch received was not a vision of beauty, it was a vision of destruction. It was taken to a place of terrible testimony, proof of everything that had gone wrong. The anatomy of the fall of the Watchers was laid before him in all its detail, and what it revealed was not only the fact of the transgression, but its mechanism. Disastrous choices do not happen suddenly. They occur through a series of small permissions, each seemingly reasonable on its own, each diverting the soul 1 degree from its course, until the soul looks entirely the opposite way and can no longer remember how it got there. The Watchers did not decide one morning to wipe out the human race. They decided to take a closer look at something beautiful. Looking turned into longing. Longing turned into obsession. Obsession turned into rationalizing that what they wanted was not actually forbidden, or if it was forbidden, that the prohibition was arbitrary, that the rules that apply to others do not apply to beings of their status. This is the oldest architecture of every fall that has ever occurred. I am different. The rules that govern others were not made for me. And from that architecture, that precise combination of pride and self-deception, came forth giants, corrupted knowledge, bleeding altars, enslaved cities, and a groaning earth crying out to heaven for salvation. Enoch watched all this and wept, not from despair, but from understanding. When you see the whole chain, from the first trace to the final destruction, you understand that none of it was inevitable. Each step was a choice. He cried out,
"How much longer will you allow this?"
The answer came, not with the heat of anger, but with the cold precision of absolute certainty.
Their time is counted. The judgment is already written. But first, you must convey these visions to your people. Warn them of what is to come. But do not let the promise swallow the warning. For beyond the fire, the flood, and the destruction of all that was wrongly built, there is a restoration. There is one coming, and his light will be the end of all darkness that now manifests itself permanently.
From that night on, Enoch was not merely a man walking with God. He was a man walking between worlds. Chapter 4. The Seven Heavens. There are things beyond the comprehension of the human mind. And there are moments when the human mind is rebuilt in such a way that it can comprehend them. What Enoch experienced in his ascension from the seven heavens was not a journey, it was a transformation. Each level was not merely a new position, it was a new dimension of understanding, a new encounter with aspects of existence inaccessible to the waking mind. They were not lifted up by wings or fire. They were lifted up by a kind of opening, as if the fabric of visible reality had been torn apart, revealing what was always on the other side. The first heaven was not as he expected. He expected splendor. He found humility. Angels of a kind he had not imagined. Not terrifying burning seraphim, not commanding archangels. These were servants of small faithful things. They directed the clouds, they guided the winds. Hay regulated the rain that fell on the mountains that the human eye could not see.
"People do not see us,"
said one of them.
"but without us, the fields would be covered in chaos. We do not need to be remembered. We need to be faithful."
Enoch felt the ground crack beneath his ego. Humanity's obsession with importance, with being seen, with doing something great enough to be remembered, was a fundamental misunderstanding of how victory actually works. Victory works from the bottom up. It begins in places unseen. It begins in the careful, consistent, unassuming loyalty of beings who will not receive applause. Every act of loyalty you have done in secret, every prayer unwitnessed, every good deed unrecorded, was seen here. It was recorded. It was more important than you knew. Importance is not proportional to visibility. The second heaven. While the first was silver and light, the second was eclipsed. It was contained. And in those chambers, in a space that existed outside of time, were the fallen, not monsters. Something more destructive than monsters. Beings of extraordinary beauty were in a state of extraordinary destruction. In their very being, you could see the magnificence of what they were designed to be. And upon that magnificence, like ashes upon coal, lay the lasting consequence of their choices. Looking into their eyes was the hardest thing. Not because they were monstrous, because they were aware. They were acutely, precisely, and painfully aware of what they had done, what they had lost, and what was to come. This awareness, this inability to stop understanding, to forget, was the nature of their torment. none of them rebelled against his chains.
Son of the earth, tell the Almighty God that we have not forgotten. Our fall still burns. We no longer beg for mercy. We only want someone to see us. We want someone to understand what we are and what it has cost us.
Enoch could not answer. He understood that interceding for these beings was not his task. He understood that some choices close doors that no human prayer can ever open again. He left the second heaven, bearing the weight of knowing what wasted potential looked like from within. The third heaven. The third heaven contained two things simultaneously, and the contrast between them was instructive. On one side, a garden, not cultivated land, the true purpose of the gardens, what all earthly gardens point to but never fully achieve. The trees were alive in a way that earthly trees are only metaphorically alive. Angel guardians, moving among them with swords of light, protected a very important beauty whose loss required active protection. On the other side, a waiting room, the anteroom of the consequences. The hall where souls who had chosen distortion against the truth waited in the private discomfort of their own memories. They were not yet in their final state, but they knew this was to come. And to know it, to be unable to change it, this knowledge was the essence of their suffering. Enoch wept in the third heaven, for he recognized faces. He saw the trajectories of the people he knew, the decisions he had witnessed. And he understood that the garden wasn't given as a performance prize. It was the cumulative result of thousands of small, correctly made choices. The garden wasn't a destination you arrived at by choosing it. It was the natural end of a direction you had been walking forward. The fourth heaven was fire and mathematics. A vast room filled with golden light, where the concept of the ceiling became irrelevant. Gigantic angelic beings carried living spheres of light on their shoulders. The light sources of the universe, each moving according to a precise and living orbit simultaneously. Mathematical in a way that transcended mechanism. The music had a mathematical rather than a mechanical aspect. The angel Uriel was there, a being who, even before the existence of human language, performed his work with complete and tireless fidelity. The sun did not simply rise, the sun obeyed. It entered through specific passages in the eastern sky and exited through corresponding passages in the west. It had a servant angel guiding it, a path given, not one of its own choosing. A program it did not choose and could not change. And each morning, before beginning its passage, it stood before the throne and received the day's command. Uriel told it that each sunrise was an act of obedience, not a mechanical repetition, a new act of submission to a new command. The sun does not assume that yesterday's permission is today's permission. It asks every morning. When Enoch understood this, something collapsed within him, because people, since they have been given the extraordinary gift of true freedom, almost universally assume that their relationship with God of yesterday is sufficient for today. There is no need to renew the instruction received in the previous period. The sun, which has no choice, asks every morning. Man, who has every choice, often asks nothing. Then Enoch looked at the stars, armies of light so great that counting them did not produce a number that could be named. He saw the whole of time, not as a line stretching from past to future, but as a tapestry already woven, each thread in place, each pattern complete, visible only from the height of the sky.
Write this down,
said Uriel.
for the day will come when people will calculate the heavens like machines and forget that the planets are obedient. They will map every star and forget that the stars sing. Write this down so that when forgetting is complete and hunger begins, and hunger always begins, there will be something to return to.
The fifth heaven. The fifth heaven was warrior. It was organized around a perpetually burning center of fire, which Enoch recognized above all as an altar. Its scent was the scent of justice, not revenge, justice. This distinction is extremely important. Revenge is personal and burning. Justice, at its best, is something impersonal. It is not cold, but warmed by something more stable. The fact that wrong things are wrong, and that wrongness cannot have the last word in a universe governed by truth. The warriors of the fifth heaven served at that altar at the command of the Archangel Michael.
We are not violence,
He said,
we are judgment. We are not summoned by rage. We are sent by command. Every war that happens on Earth is decided here before the first blow is struck.
We are only commanded when the weight of accumulated wrong reaches the threshold that heaven decides cannot be crossed.
In the last days, Michael whispered to him that our war would be the last war, and the King of Justice will not need us to fight him. He will utter a single word, and the remnants of his kingdom of wrong will perish. As Enoch departed from the fifth heaven, he possessed an understanding of power he had never comprehended before. True power does not need to be constantly displayed. True power waits. True power operates under order. And the willingness to operate under order does not mean a decrease in power. This is its highest expression. The sixth heaven. The sixth heaven was a library. Not a library of knowledge sitting on shelves that could be borrowed. A library in the sense of a permanent, indelible record of everything that has ever occurred in the order of creation. Every thought, every word, every decision, every action taken in the dark, and every action taken in the light. There was nothing filtered through the self-justifying filter of meaning that people use to make their own history more complete. Everything was exactly as it was. One of the scribes turned to Enoch and said,
You too have a book.
not a book written by Enoch, a book that records the life of a faithful person. It consists of the sum of his choices, of his private acts of loyalty, which he thought only he knew. Then, with the personal weight of seeing his own life from the height of heaven, he understood that private life is the only real life. Everything is a presentation. Private life. Your thoughts when no one hears them. Your choices when no one knows them. Your behavior toward people who can do nothing to you. That is the essence of the book. The scribe said,
These will be judged with greater severity than those rulers who abuse their power.
For rule is not a privilege. This is the heaviest form of servitude that exists. Seventh, heaven. Then the seventh. And here all language falls short, not metaphorically, but literally. The seventh heaven was not a place that could be described, because description requires reducing something to its representable components. The seventh heaven had no components separate from the whole. It simply existed. Total, undivided, incomprehensible, alive in every direction at once. Enoch underwent a transformation before entering. The transformation was not painful. It was more like a clarification, like a blurry image finding its clarity. The throne, surrounded by cherubim, seraphim, and ophanim, living wheels of fire, and angels of presence, whose entire existence was the act of being in God's presence. They did not sing in the sense of producing music. Their existence was a song. Enoch fell, not from weakness, for falling was the only honest answer one could give to the one true thing. Every fear he carried burned, every doubt burned, every remnant of the self that had endured throughout a years-long march burned. It was not destroyed, it was purified. And then, from a stillness that was not silence, for silence is an absence, and this was in presence, a voice came.
Arise, Enoch. You have seen what many have longed to see. Bear this testimony. Speak, write, do not be afraid. For in the last days your words will awaken the sleeping, and the sleeping will remember what they always knew but forgot.
He was sent back. He did not diminish with his return. He expanded with his return, carrying the seventh heaven within him like a coal pressed to his chest. He warmed it from within, making it a source of warmth in a world that had grown too cold. Chapter 5. Prisons and the Abyss. After the seven heavens, Enoch was brought down, not a fall. A guided descent to places where most people spend their lives as if they didn't exist. The mountains of judgment were the first stop. In a crevice at the summit of one of these mountains, Enoch saw Azazel, chained in darkness, not the absence of light, but the enduring memory of the rejected light. He had not given humanity power. He had given them the means of their own dissolution and called it a gift. He spoke from within his chains.
Tell the Almighty God that we have not forgotten. We no longer beg for mercy. We only wish not to be erased from the memory of those who were here.
Uriel's hand on Enoch's shoulder.
Judgment is not erasure. Judgment is a lasting memory, and that is precisely what makes it what it is.
Then the eternal prisons, rooms without doors, without windows, not made by hands, made by words. Here, the Nephilim souls, whose bodies the flood had destroyed, but whose spirits it had not, continue to wander the world as disembodied hunger, to seek open doors in the spiritual architecture of man. Doors opened by grief, anger, addiction, or despair. Here too were dead kings who had deified themselves. Each was held in the private prison of what they had built. What you build imprisons you. If you build with truth, what you build sustains you. If you build with deceit, what you build drags you down. The prison is the building material you choose.
Is there no return for them?
Enoch asked.
No, for those already judged. But for those still living, the book of life is still open. The warning is the frame, the promise is the picture. Say both.
Then in the deepest chamber, a place where even Uriel paused, the ancient abyss, the ancient site of the first rebellion. And then, sudden, complete, absolute, a light, illuminating the abyss from a height without limit. Even the deepest chasm is not beyond my field of vision. I am the beginning and the end. I judge because I love. I wait because I love. And I love because this is what I am, not what I do. This is what I am. Enoch was lifted from that place not by wings but by grace, which, as it later turned out, was not an emotion, but a structural force in the universe as real and stronger than gravity. Chapter 6. The Book of Stories. The scrolls were filling up, not with ink, with vision. Now he was given the final chapter, sealed with 3 seals of fire. The chapter Uriel told him was not for now, but for the end, the Book of Tales. These are not for this age. These are for a time when men have lost their instinct for justice, for a time when the powerful have so completely rewritten the meaning of virtue, when tyranny roams freely in the language of righteousness. In those days, these tales will be the hand, and also the hand that offers bread to those freed by the hand. First story. He saw a white throne in a field without borders. On the throne was a figure both ancient and timeless at the same time, combining the depth of absolute continuity with the freshness of absolute being. Next to the occupied throne, there was a second throne, empty, but not empty, like a seat reserved for a particular guest, not empty before the guest arrives. The emptiness was an expression in itself, a guarantee. Someone whose place has been prepared beforehand is coming. The voice said,
"This is the Son of Man, the chosen one, born before the first star, hidden until appointed time."
His name was given before the sun and moon were placed in their orbits. Enoch watched as the books of the kingdoms were open, every structure that takes what is for the weak and gives it to the strong, every dynasty whose legitimacy rests on the blood of the people it claims to serve. They passed before the Son of Man one by one, and they were weighed one by one, not according to stated intentions, not according to the official histories always written by the victors, according to the weight of the real impact on the lives of those who had no say in its construction. Every empire that tells its own greatness from the perspective of those who built the monuments, not those who carry the stones, will stand before this judgment. The weight of the stones carried will be the truth of the judgment. Second story. The second figure stood in an open plain, devoid of walls, boundaries, any architectural statement indicating that some people belonged here and others did not. He was surrounded by the light of being, a special quality, not about warmth, that makes the space around a truly good person feel more honest, warmer. Those excluded by this structure of power came to him. Widows deceived by legal systems, orphans swallowed up by welfare machines and discarded as waste. Those who were broken, their brokenness a direct result of the systems that used them. They came without ceremony, without a show of merit, and he accepted them, not as a program, as a person, individually. Each one was seen in its entirety. Each one, as they departed the encounter, took with them something they had not brought with them, not just a source, but the regaining of the feeling that their existence was significant. Those who rejected him would stand before the final judgment and listen to his speech. "You did to me what you did to the least of them. You did not do for me what you did not do for the least of them." Every act of denial against a suffering person is an act of denial against him who created them, who invisibly lives in the specificity of their needs. The divine is not only at the top of the hierarchy, it is also at the bottom, in his face that no one looks at, in the cry of a person that no one hears. The measure of a civilization is not its architecture. Its measure is those who live below it.
Third story. The third figure stood atop a mountain of fire burning upwards, a fire that did not consume what it touched, but rather illuminated, making its true nature visible in a way ordinary light could not. Its form was like that of a lion, but its face was human. And its crown did not merely rest on its head, it seemed to grow from its head, as if it were a nature it had always possessed, not a quality it had acquired dominion over. This was not the eternal judge of the first story. This was the figure of the final intervention, the one who had come to the end of the age of error, not to prolong the dialogue, not to offer another invitation, but to bring it to an end. For patience, which is not weakness but love, is not at the same time an eternal harmony. There is a point where the accumulation of unrepented wrongs reaches a threshold where even the silence of heaven becomes complicity. At that threshold, the lion descends, with tens of thousands of holy beings, with the full weight of accumulated justice, with the certainty of a voice that has been patient for a time older than human history. Every idol, every organized system of deception, every power structure based on the exploitation of the image of God in people is destroyed, and they are replaced by an entirely different order. A kingdom that needs no defense, because its foundation is love, not power. Enoch understood that in that third parable, the three figures were one: the judge, the healer, the lion. Three forms of the same love. Love that judges because it cannot make wrong appear right. Love that heals because it cannot abandon what it has created. And love that finally puts an end to the long reign of falsehood.
Write this.
Enoch heard.
For when the world forgets my justice, this book will be its memory. When the righteous fall into doubt in the long darkness of waiting, this book will be the lamp that will not go out. And he wrote.
Chapter 7. The Immortal Man. An afternoon came like every afternoon, but the last. Enoch was in the field, the same field he had walked in for years, the same sky, the same light. And something began to happen in his body. Not pain, not sickness. A flash of lightning. It was as if the mass of physical existence was slowly being released. He looked at his hands and saw light passing through them. Not metaphorically, literally. The boundary between his body and the light around him was dissolving. He understood what was happening. He had always known it would be this way. Not like every person abstractly knows that their physical life will end, but in a special way where the end is foretold. He had seen its name in the books of the sixth heaven. In the seventh heaven, he had been told he would not taste death. He did not resist. His whole life was the practice of a single stance: openness, willing to receive what was given, to let go of what was desired, to remain permeable to the being that had walked beside him for 300 years. Now, ordinariness was ending, and the extraordinary was revealing itself as what ordinariness had always been prepared for. His life had become a farewell. Every day he walked with God in a world that had ceased to walk with God was a testimony. Every morning, returning from prayer, he carried something invisible that his family couldn't name but could feel its edges. This was the legacy he left them. Then the field, the sky, the light, and then nothing. Not darkness, not the closing of eyes, an opening, the final opening. Every vision, every ascent, every moment of standing before something too great for the human body to bear, all of it was preparation for this moment when the practice became permanent, and the threshold that had temporarily passed became the land where it would live. it was no longer there, in the world. Completely and utterly, it was more. The field carried only the impression of where it stood. Its family would search for it, but they would not find it. And the failure to find it would be a message in itself. The direction they looked was not the direction it went. The direction it went was upward, and upward was possible for each of them. That was the point.
Chapter 8. The Mirror.
Enoch did not write epistles. He did not build cities or command armies. He had no institutional legacy, no dynasty, no school of thought bearing his name. What he possessed was the strangest, simplest, most radical identity document in human history. He walked with God, and God took him. The reason this has been significant for thousands of years across cultures and traditions that agree on very little is not primarily historical or theological. It is personal. Enoch's life shows the upper limit of what is possible for a being created in God's image to achieve true freedom in a world that resists upward movement. The upper limit is not comfort. It is not security. It is not the successful management of a pleasant life. The upper limit is transformation. To align so completely with God's reality that the distance between man and the divine disappears. This happens not by man ceasing to be human, but by man becoming fully what he was always designed to be. The problem is that modern life is organized to prevent this at almost every level. Not with malice, through distraction. Modern distraction tools are more addictive than anything the world has ever produced. They are designed with one clear purpose: to attract and hold your attention. Not to serve it, but to seize it. Enoch's attention was his primary spiritual tool. The desire to turn not to the loudest voice, but to the truest one, was what made walking with God possible. The discipline he practiced for 65 years before becoming the Enoch we know built the inner structure capable of holding on to what was given to him. And the world you live in, from the moment you wake up until the moment you lose consciousness at night, tries to break this attention down into tiny pieces for nothing that requires depth or continuity. This is the fundamental spiritual problem of the age. Everything that matters requires continuous, directed, willing attention. Every relationship that goes deeper than the surface. Every truly creative work. Every prayer that is more than performance. You cannot walk with God in pieces. You can only walk with God in a long, slow, cumulative way, as Enoch did. Step by step, day by day, year by year, until this walk becomes your nature and the being you practice becomes permanent. Enoch was a husband and a father. He worked. He was a man who lived in a world far more corrupted and broken than you live in. And within that world, he chose to walk in a particular direction with a particular quality of attention. This choice, consistently made for 3 centuries, produced a life filled with holiness, where the boundary between the physical and the eternal suddenly vanished one afternoon in an ordinary field. He walked toward the light, and the light was where he was directed from the beginning. The story of Enoch asks only one thing of you: not knowledge, not theology, not an intellectual agreement with any metaphysical framework. Just one thing: a question. The question his life poses to every life that encounters it. Not whether you believe in the invisible world, not whether you have spiritual experiences, not whether you go to the right institutions or speak the right words. The question is simpler and harder than all of these. Are you walking? Are you running? Are you aiming for the best? Are you building a life that impresses others with evidence of your spiritual depth? You are walking, slowly, faithfully, in the direction of what is right, good, and holy, even if that direction is uncertain, even if the ground is unclear, and even if the world around you is organized according to a completely different direction. Are you walking with God? Not in a way you can show, not in a way that can be measured or publicized. It's a private, unassuming, daily, cumulative way, like Enoch's, because he understood something that most people never understand in their entire lives, that walking is the destination, that the practice of being with God is not preparation for something else, that it is that thing itself. It is the totality of everything. And every step you take in that direction, however small, however private, however invisible to every eye in the world, is recorded. It is seen. Stone upon stone is added to something that will one day be completed. So walk.